Good morning. Today is June 20th, summer solstice, longest day of the year, and I want to put up chapter 6, also one of the longer chapters in terms of my review. I was going to break it down into parts, but then I thought I get on a flow and I get on a coffee-fueled sermon. I'd like to put it all up, and you guys are free to stop the video anytime, watch portions of it, skip around. But no, there is a lot of information there, and I'm probably not that much different than you. When I see a video that's more than 2 or 3 minutes, I have a tough time even wanting to sit down and attempt to look at it. But don't be afraid to chunk this out and look at portions as you want to go forward. It's going to be a bit of a longer video, and I apologize for that because I wouldn't want to watch it either if it's that long. Don't have to watch it all at once. You don't even have to look at the video. Just listen and try to comprehend those areas that you feel weak in regarding to your readings from the book. But offer and acceptance, the heart and soul of contracts, right? The meeting of the minds. What do the parties want to do? What's party A required to do? What's party B be required to do? The offeror is the one that's going to make the offer. The offeree is the one receiving it. It's technical language. You'll get accustomed to it over time. If you're not doing this for a long period of time or you're new at it, you might forget which party is which. Just the offeror is giving up the offer. The offeree is the recipient. You'll get it over time. Don't panic on that if you're uncomfortable with vocabulary. None of us are when we first start. But what does the offer have to contain for elements? We alluded to this in chapter 5. Well, the offer has to have definiteness. And I believe the book describes, it actually says the word, it must be definite. Definite means there has to be enough terms that an objective observer of the interaction can say, I know what that party is offering. I know what they're saying. Usually it relates to how many, quantity. It usually relates to price, but not always. I'll get to that in a minute. But it has to have enough information so I know what they're obligated to do. It doesn't have to have every nitty gritty little detail to be a valid offer, just enough to know what that party is basically committing themselves to do. So that's definiteness. Why don't you necessarily have to have price? I think somebody in the class has a spouse or a relative that's a plumber. And I had a plumbing emergency here recently. My grandfather and father were plumbers, and I didn't adopt as many skills as I liked it from them. So I had to call a plumber. He came in and it was just a broken pipe, not the biggest deal. I knew how to shut up the main line, but he came right over. He was available. He lived right in the neighborhood. So he goes, I'll be right over. He comes over real quick. He says, yeah, I'll get to it right now, Jim. I said, great. I got to go run to something else. I had to go pick up a kid or something. And when I left, he came back and gave a price. He gave me a bill. And I thought it was in the ballpark, knowing a little bit about plumbing. I said, it's great, fantastic, got it done. But what did we never do? Did we have a valid contract? And he says, yeah, I can come in and fix that length of pipe. I'll put in a couple of cufflinks and put in a new piece of copper right there. That's what he was promising to do. Was that enough? And was my promise to say, I want you to fix the piece of pipe enough to understand what my obligation was? Even though we never set a price. Yeah, it probably was, because in the big scheme of things, couldn't you as the listener realize what I was obligated to do? To pay for the services and the parts, and he was obligated to put it in a workmanlike manner, or a manner that's standard in the plumbing industry. What can the price be then? Can he charge me anything he wants? No, it has to be within the realm of what it can be on the high end, it can be on the low end, but it has to be in the ballpark of what most plumbers would see as somewhat in the scheme of reasonableness. That's a little scary, and there are lawsuits over it. Some of you might have had car repairs before. You come into a car shop and you say, something rattling in my car, engine is making a funny noise. Would you please fix it? I'm going to have my friend pick me up here. I'll be back tonight. You come back tonight and you get this outrageous bill. Well, you told the auto mechanic to fix it. They found a real problem. They did it in good faith, and next thing you know, you got an $800 bill to pay. Would that have been a binding contract? Yeah, I think it would be, because you told them, gave them authority to fix it. They found the problem, and that's the nature of what it costs to fix those things. Could you have avoided all these controversies? Absolutely. Nothing prevents you from putting a great deal of detail down as to what you are offering the other party and what you expect them to do in return in acceptance. So that's where the more significant a contract might be, the more likely you might want to reflect on what the details actually are before you get committed, because you can be committed on a lot of oral contracts for a significant amount of money. And when you tend to reduce things to writing, especially if they're for a high dollar value, tend to be a little bit more thoughtful. Think about painting a house. I used to paint for a living with a buddy of mine, just passed away, as a matter of fact, a couple of weeks ago. But when I was a kid, I painted for him. I was in college, and he actually wrote out a pretty good contract for a guy that didn't have a lot of education, and he put down a lot of details. And I remember sometimes homeowners saying, well, I want a third coat on this section where it's weak. He goes, well, okay, we can write up a new contract. He goes, well, isn't it part of it because the second coat didn't really cover it the way I wanted? And he had a written contract that says this is for prime coat and 2 finish coats of latex paint. It was clear what our obligation was. But what if he came in and said, he's a professional painter, and he came in and says, I will paint your house for $4,000. We didn't talk about how many coats of paint. We didn't talk about who was obligated to supply the paint. We didn't even talk about when it would be completed. Would we still have a valid contract if the homeowner says, yeah, for $4,000, I will hire to paint my house? That probably is a valid contract. When is the time of performance going to be? Within a reasonable period of time. It's summer right now, probably, I don't know, next month, I would say, would be a reasonable period of time. Maybe even 6 weeks out would be probably reasonable. And whether or not the paint would be supplied or we would incur that as part of our price would be whatever the industry standard usually is for something like that. But could you see a debate? Could you see how things might explode? Sure. So try to put as much detail in so you don't have to fight with the opposition, who in good faith might really have an objection saying there wasn't enough definiteness to the terms of the contract. Now, obviously on trivial contract, I shouldn't say trivial, but on very small contracts, are we really going to spend a lot of time figuring out all those details? You're going to turn people off to your business practices if there's too much red tape, for lack of a better word, before you enter into a valid contract. So the first element, it's got to be definite. We got to know what the parties are offering. The second one is it has to be seriously intended. Obviously, if I'm joking in jest, I say I have a motorcycle and my friend really likes it, and I know it's maybe objectively worth close to $10,000, and I say I'll sell it to you $1,000 cash today, and I'll give you a ride home too, something weird like that. And they say, yeah, absolutely. Well, clearly, if I'm just teasing or joking, that would not be a valid offer. It's not subject to acceptance. However, it's an objective standard. So if I act very seriously and I give a more of a serious price, even though I'm trying to tease someone who I know will really like my motorcycle, and I said, hey, I'll sell it to you for $7,000 cash. I'm thinking about, upgrading or downgrading to some different kind of model. And they accepted. I would actually be bound, even though internally I might have been jesting. It's the objective appearance of the nature of the offer I'm giving to the party. Those are jokes. What about another way? Is there another way you can be not serious about doing something? Yeah, it can actually be offered in anger. I can think of 2 examples of that. My brother, when he got out of the Coast Guard, he bought this Oldsmobile Delta 88. It was big as a yacht. It was gigantic. I mean, I don't know. He just wanted to think he looked like Elvis Presley or something like that. It was a really big, giant, cool car. And he was trying to change the oil himself, and he couldn't get the oil filter off. And I'm 6 years younger than my brothers. I'm just a kid hanging out in the yard. And he couldn't get the oil filter off, and he was getting really frustrated. He's busting his knuckles, and he's under the car, and he comes out, he's filthy. And he was swearing. And he goes, I'll sell the car right now to the first person that comes up with $500. And he just paid $10,000 for it. That's obviously not a serious offer, and it's not subject to acceptance because he's clearly just doing it out of rage, and he's not meaning to actually make an offer to me at that time. So that's the second element of a valid offer, seriously intended. The third, it has to be communicated. We can choose who we contract with. Sometimes if we affect interstate commerce, we can't discriminate on race, color, creed, national origin, sex, sexual orientation, things like that, because the law wants us to basically have civility in everyone we deal with, and it relates to our society functioning as a kind of a free and open society where people are treated fairly. But in terms of that, I'm thinking about selling my motorcycle. Can I just offer it to my friend and not to the world? Absolutely. You're free to contract with whom you want to, and you're free to avoid doing business with whom you don't want to, as long as it's not for a discriminatory purpose like race, color, creed, national origin, sex, sexual orientation, age. And I apologize if I missed all the sort of what we call classically protected classes, but I think you get the drift. So it has to be communicated. So what if I tell my friend Bob, I'm going to sell Sam my motorcycle for $10,000. I am going to make him that offer. Now, Sam can't come around and accept it if he hears it from my first party, I think I said Roger, because I have to be the one to communicate it to the recipient. And no one else can accept that offer. So when Roger hears I'm going to offer it to Sam, Roger goes, I'll do it. What he's actually doing is making me an offer. He's not accepting mine because I'm free to make offers to whom I wish. In business, usually you're willing to work with anybody, and you're usually not even making an offer. You're doing something which comes up later called general advertising, and that's going to surprise a lot of people who rules for that. So those are the 3 elements. It's got to have definiteness. We need to know some terms. What are the parties going to be obligated to do towards one another? It has to be seriously intended. And third, it has to be communicated to the offeree. That's kind of almost implicit. And that's it. That's where I should have stopped this video and then started a new one. But I'm just going to keep rolling through and get into this next stage I call it the advertising exception. So We don't get them as much as we used to, but you get flyers in the mail for different companies. In fact, I just went to the mailbox. I have a PO box for my law practice, and I kind of apologize to the world, but I haven't gone there since the COVID outbreak in March, actually very early March. And when I got there, the mailbox was just full of stuff. And a lot of it was what I call junk mail, general advertising from the LL Bean and some other clothing companies, and some of the things I never even solicited, asked for. And I'm tossing them because I had such a big bundle of mail as I'm leaving. I was thinking that's a perfect example of this thing called invitations to make offers. Believe it or not, the merchant, the person that's the merchant that puts out these ads, either window displays, general mailings, and catalogs, even on websites that go out to the general public, they're not earmarked to a specific individual or group of individuals. That's not an offer. So my point is, all of a sudden I see this ad in a magazine. It says 3 shirts for $150, these really high-end shirts. And I say, I accept. I'd like the 3 shirts. Here's my sizes. And they say, you know what? We're not. It's actually, we want $200 from it. That was just to get your interest in the shirt. Now that you see the quality and the nature of the shirt, we want $200. Believe it or not, they're not violating a contractual principle. They didn't make an offer to me. They made an invitation to bid. That shocks a lot of people because it rarely happens. And why does it rarely happen? What they're doing is like a bait and switch, and they might be violating a consumer protection law, not a contractual principle, but we have put certain things about false advertising, deceptive acts and practices would probably be banning that kind of deceptive ad. But think about this: it's not always deceptive. I'm a merchant, and I'm selling the new Xbox game, and now I don't think it is challenging as it once was. But when I remember, it was 15 years ago, I was getting an Xbox One for my kid. And they were like, you had to get them like in the black market. You couldn't even get them from the store. So could you imagine if the store says, we got the Xbox One for $399 and they ran out? And I said, but I accept. You are bound. If you don't give me that, I'm going to sue for damages because now it's going to cost me $600 to get it from some other merchant or from, eBay or some third party. I accepted your offer before you revoked it, and therefore you're bound. It's fundamentally unfair to make people who put advertising out to be held to every person that receives it as accepting those offers. They may not have the supply, and society's determined that those are invitations to bid. Obviously, if they did it as a bait and switch when you get in the store and say, oh, the Xbox One actually costs $1,400. We just wanted you to come in here and negotiate. Look how cool it is. And it's like a sucker's ploy. That would probably be illegal under some other conception. So don't get too lost in the invitations to make offers. But at one time, it was a big deal. You'd have these, back in the 40s and 50s, you'd have these big New York City merchants put up like ads for like a famous one that I remember reading in law school was they put up this china set. I guess you get somebody serving like 8 plates and 8 smaller plates and 8 teacups and all the different related in the set. And they were advertising it for something like $29.99, but it was so everyone would come storming in because it was like a brand name. And he goes, no, that was just to get you in here. Its actual price is, $129. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an error. We just wanted you to come in and so do some negotiation. This comes up a lot in real estate. If I put my house up for sale and I put a sign out in front of my house for sale, and I even put the price out, occasionally you see that, $300,000, and somebody comes driving and knocking on my door and says, I accept. They're not really accepting. What they're coming to do is negotiate to make an offer to me. They might say my offer is the $300,000 that you offered for the house. Now it's up to me to accept or reject. By putting the sign out to the general public, was just having people come in to make an invitation to me to bid. It's often the price I put on it, no question about it. But I'm not legally bound to accept because it was out to the general public in a form of advertising like that. Throws a lot of people off. I think there's only one minor test question on it. Doesn't come up too much because of the consumer protection laws we have to avoid that kind of fraudulent advertising. Duration of the offer. This is big. So hopefully if you bared with me for these 14 minutes, you're at this point. What's interesting is if you offer to sell me a hot cup of coffee, it's a cold day. It's not today, but what if it was a cold day? It's wintertime and you came in with a couple Dunkin' Donuts and you had an extra one and you see me there and you know I like my black coffee, you know I like it medium, and you haven't handled it too much because I'm a germaphobe, even outside the COVID thing. And I say, okay, I see it in the tray and it's still steaming hot. I can see some of the steam coming through the lid. And you say, I offer to sell it to you for $1, And I say, oh, I'll have to think about that. And then I sit down in the back of the room. I were at some little seminar. How long does that offer stay out? Is it going to just stay open? I haven't rejected it yet. If I said, no, I'm not interested, the offer dies if I said that. No, if I say no. The offer dies and I can't just turn around and go, you know what? Yeah, I will take it. they're free to reject me because my initial rejection actually wiped out their initial offer. That surprises a lot of people. It usually doesn't happen in that quick momentary time. But think about it. They're offering me a hot cup of coffee on a cold winter day. How long does that offer stay open for? They might tell me the offer is only good for 5 minutes. Well, that means in 5 minutes it will definitely be over. If they didn't say that, though, that they didn't give a duration of how long their offer is, and they just left it hanging out there in the wind, how long should it stay open? What should the law provide? And the law provides a very common sense conclusion. It's a reasonable period of time. So a hot cup of coffee on a cold winter day indoors, I don't know, that offer good for 20 minutes, half hour, something like that. How about outside today? It's very hot out here. And you offer me a mayonnaise and bologna sandwich, and we're sitting out on the picnic table in the blistering sun, and you open it up, you take it out of the cooler, and you put it down on the table, and it says, I offer to sell you this bologna and mayonnaise sandwich for $2. Nothing's mentioned about the duration of that offer, so it would be a reasonable period of time. Mayonnaise and bologna in a hot sunny day, I would suggest that's a fairly brief period of time that that offer stays open. You can see it's different in contextual things. You offer to sell me your car, and I said, let me think about it. The other side says, okay, go ahead. How long? You come back 3 years later when they find out these cars are rare and very valuable and they've appreciated value. Now I accept your offer. It's a reasonable period of time. I urge you, if you're the one making the offer, you're the one trying to solicit business on the other side, and you're making an offer to somebody, tell them this offer is open for 72 hours. This offer is open for 1 week. Don't leave yourself out in the debatable area of what reasonableness is and what reasonable isn't. Obviously, food and beverage, much shorter. If it's a piece of merchandise, might be much longer. Now, here's what's interesting. I make an offer to sell this cup of coffee. And you say, I don't know, let me think about it. I got to sit down. And then somebody else walks by and goes, hey, Steve, you're selling coffee? I'll buy that off you. He goes, okay, I'll sell it to you. Well, what happened to the offer to me? It got revoked. The offeror is called the master of the offer or the owner of the offer, and they are free to revoke it at any time prior to acceptance. So if they say to me, hey, Corman, I'll sell a cup of coffee for $1, and I say, let me think about it, and I go to sit down and they turn around and sell it to somebody else, they had every right to do that. Even if they said this is what surprises people. They say, hey, I got my briefcase with me, I got my jacket on, let me go sit down for a second. They say, don't worry, I'll hold the coffee for the next 5 minutes before I offer it to somebody else. 30 seconds goes by, and this person offers it to Steve, and they sell it to Steve. Did they violate some contract with me? Many of them say, yeah. No, they didn't. Why? What did I give him or her in exchange for their promise to keep the offer open to me for 5 minutes? Nothing, right? Nothing at all. They're not bound by that promise. The promise, unsupported by what we call consideration, there's no obligation flowing back and forth. They don't have to keep this offer open. This actually just happened to me 1 week ago. I had this car, and another one very similar to it came up on someone's Facebook. I'm not on Facebook, so I don't know how that stuff works, but it came up in either Craigslist or Facebook. My buddy, who's my mechanic, he spotted, he knew I have the same model or very similar model. And he goes, look at the price. He goes, we should go check it out. And I said, all right, well, come with me because he's a mechanic. He knows what's going on. And so he calls the woman who had the ad and said, yeah, we have an appointment for tomorrow night. And so I talked to my buddy, and his name's Ron. And Ron says, hey, don't worry. She promised to hold it till tomorrow night. And I laughed at that. He goes, well, that doesn't mean anything. He goes, of course it does. If she sells it to somebody else, you could sue her. Well, first of all, I don't want to buy a lawsuit. And secondly, there would be no lawsuit, because what did we give her in exchange for her to promising to keep that car available to us till tomorrow night to see if we want to make an offer? Nothing. It's not binding. There's nothing enforceable at all whatsoever. That shocks a lot of people. So, sometimes you go look at something and person says, don't worry, I'll hold it to you next week. You think about it. That's not binding at all on anybody in the party. And so it shocks people when they hear that. Now, is there a way to make it binding? And I'm going to skip a little ahead in the book here. It's called an option contract. It's a really nice tool, especially for very big contracts. One came out here. I live in Brimfield, Mass, and not too far from here is a town called Palmer. In Palmer, Mass, there was talk of a casino coming. There was a landowner there that had, 100 acres, something like that, right off the Mass Pike. And he was negotiating with Mohegan Sun. Mohegan Sun did not buy that property because they didn't know if the casino permitting process would go through. The town has to vote either up or down to be the host community. And so many people thought, yeah, Palmer's going to vote it up. They're going to get all kinds of tax benefits, and local businesses thought they might benefit. Other people thought it might be detrimental. Well, Mohegan Sun did not buy that property for, $5 million, $10 million, whatever it was. They bought an option contract to buy it for, say, $10 million. I mean, they don't have to come up with $10 million. They came up with maybe $50,000 for the right to buy it for $10 million over the next, say, 4 years. So during that, it took about a year and a half before everything got voted on. Palmer shot it down. They did not want to be a host community to this casino, so Mohegan Sun walked away. They spent $50,000 to have the right to buy that land. Now the land to them is worthless. Why would they want land out in the middle of, East Podunk, hillbilly country? They're not going to be able to do anything with it. And so they walk away with losing $50,000, but they're not stuck holding a $10 million piece of property that they have no purpose for, and good luck marketing it later on. Options are nice tools. I'm going to go long in this video, and I really apologize, but I had this fantasy about moving to Martha's Vineyard and somehow teaching at Cape Cod Community College, and I'll commute back and forth on the ferry. God knows how I'm going to afford a house on Martha's Vineyard, but it's kind of like a fantasy of mine. So think about it. All of a sudden, there's a position open up at Cape Cod Community College. I apply for it. I learn I'm one of the 3 finalists, and I got the final interview coming up. I'm all excited. So I'm goofing around Martha's Vineyard, and I finally find a little shack of a place in the middle of the island, and that I could maybe swing and afford. And it's got a good price. I'm like, ooh, I should buy it. What if I bought it, and then I don't land the job at Cape Cod Community College? Am I going to commute from Martha's Vineyard to Gardner? That would be outrageous and very, very difficult. Not to mention that I'm probably leaving my family behind to do this. So that's a whole other issue. So I have this issue. I see this beautiful house. It's in my affordable range. But if I buy it and I don't get the job at Cape Cod, I'm kind of screwed. What can I do to keep that opportunity open to me? Well, I could tell the seller, I said, hey, do you promise to keep it open to me at this price for the next month? That's when I'll find out whether or not I've landed a job or not. What if they said yes? You already know that wouldn't be binding on them. They could say yes, but then they could sell it to somebody else because they got a few more dollars for it, or someone in like a cash sale and it was more attracted to them. They just want to move the property. So what can I do? I could say, I'll give you $5,000. Now, there's no set value here, but I want to offer enough money to make it enticing to them. So say I offer $1,500. $1,500 to keep that offer open to me exclusively for the next 6 weeks. And that way they can't sell it to anybody else, or they'd be subject to a lawsuit for any damages. Option contracts are a very, very powerful tool. In business, you might want to know about them. I don't know if you'll get in that level. I dabble a little bit in real estate sometimes. So I think about that. Like, there's a nice house that would be great as a professional law office. Me and my buddies are interested in it. But, I don't know about zoning. Can we run an office there? He goes, well, let's maybe, before we do all that legwork, or maybe there's an issue with the septic or something, maybe we should do an option contract so we have the right to buy it for this really good price, but we always have the right to walk away. Do you get your money back on the option? No, you lose that money. But if you're creative, you say, yeah, we want to put a $1,000 option contract in. Give us 30 days or 2 months to elect to buy or walk away. But if we elect to buy, you'll reduce the price of the ultimate home by $1,000. So in a sense, we can get our option money back. But that didn't mean there wasn't consideration, because they get to keep that $1,000 whether we go forward or whether we don't. So those are option contracts. But the duration of the offer, that throws a lot of things off. And so related to that, I make an offer to you to sell my iPhone. iPhone here, I offer to sell it to you for, this is an older one. I think it's an older one. My daughter works at Apple. I don't really get new ones all the time, and I don't know how they work. But I offer to sell you this for $200. We know if I don't put anything in the offer when it expires in a reasonable period of time. But I already said this. I have the power to revoke that offer at any time. So how do I do it? Well, I can literally say, I can contact you and say, I revoke that offer. I changed my mind. It's over. The other way is I can do something inconsistent with the intent to keep it open. I sell it to somebody else. Or I do something where the actual physical phone, I carve my name and gold letters in the back. That's obviously an act inconsistent with my desire to sell it to you. So that's one way to revoke. One is overt communication to the offeree, deals off, I changed my mind. The other is doing an act inconsistent with me keeping the offer open, to like doing something that makes it novel to me and shows my intent not to want to sell it to you anymore. Or I sell it to somebody else. That kills the offer. And I have the power to do that, even if I promise to hold it open to you, unless you paid an option fee to keep it open only exclusive to you. The other is if I put in a specific time. This offer is open for 24 hours. If at the end of 24 hours the offer expires, I can renew it to you. We're free to contract on anything else we want, as long as it's legal or not a void against public policy. So I can always renew it. The other is if the subject matter got destroyed. I'm going to go swimming later. I go swimming. I have it in my pocket. It gets destroyed. You can no longer accept because the item is now gone. It's almost as if I sold it to somebody else. It's just simply been destroyed. This is an unusual one, but death or insanity kills an offer. So I offer to sell it to you. You haven't accepted yet. I die, and you approach my daughter, who's going to be the executor of my estate, and said, "Hey, Grace, your dad died, but he promised to sell me that phone." He goes, "Well, he didn't promise to sell it. He made you an offer, and you didn't accept it while he was alive. So therefore, the offer dies with him." Same with insanity. If I go, I get dementia or something like that, or I just go insane because of the COVID thing, which might well happen, I'm no longer competent to enter into a valid contract. So the insanity basically eviscerates my offer. It's kind of common sense. This is a surprising one, rejection. So I see you, we're talking, I know you want an iPhone, you want to use one, I kind of took care of it. You say, I'll sell it to you for $200. And you say, Corman, no, my offer's gone. So I start walking away, and I was thinking, geez, where am I going to get a phone like that for $200? He says, Corman, I will buy it for $200. I am no longer the offeror. You've become the offeror because my original offer is gone. It's off the table. What do most people do in the moment like that? Yeah, okay, we got a deal. But we switched the roles of the party. I no longer was the offeror because your initial rejection erased it off basically the blackboard, if you will. It's blank slate now. And when you turn around and say, "Oh no, I will buy it for $200," you're no longer the offeree. You're now the offeror. What am I free to say? No, change my mind. I'm walking away. So anytime you reject, the offer is erased, and we have to start from scratch. We can change the rules of the party. The other is something called a counteroffer, which is very, very challenging to people. So you see my phone, and I say, I'll sell it to you for $200, and you say, I'll do it for $190. If you say you'll do it for $190, you haven't accepted. You've made a counteroffer. And what does it do to my offer? It eviscerates it. It wipes it off the face of basically the forum. It's no longer there. And so I say no, and you say, okay, $200. You're no longer accepting my offer. That was removed. You're now making a new, fresh offer for what was my original offer to you. That's now disappeared, and we're free to walk away from that. So you're going to be very cautious. If you really want something and you're willing to pay what the offered price is, like, geez, you're hoping to get a discount or you're hoping to get something repaired, don't do a counteroffer. What you do is an inquiry. It's very delicate and it's very nuanced, and there's a lot of debate about whether something is a counteroffer or an inquiry. What would be an inquiry? All right, Corman, I'm interested at $200, but would you consider putting on a new Apple brand leatherette case over it before I purchase? That's not an overt rejection of your offer. That's an inquiry. Or I used to always use I used to have a Prius car, and I loved it, but I always joked around with the other business faculty at the Mount about selling them my Prius because they were so in love with it. They weren't, none of them liked it, but I loved it. And I would say things like, okay, I'll sell you my Prius for $5,000. And then Elmer Eubanks or one of the other business faculty, then they've been changing recently, but they come back and then say, yeah, I'll do it, but I want 4 new tires on there, Corman. I want all your kids' French fries out of the back seats removed because they become petrified like little chunks of wood. I want those out before I buy. That's a counteroffer. And I can say no. And they say, all right, Corman, I'll buy it just like it is, $5,000. I can also say no because my offer was gone once they made a counteroffer and changed the terms. Basically, there's a theory law school and other instructors on videotapes calls the offer and acceptance the same. So you got all these elements of the offer. They have to be identical to the acceptance. If they're not, that's a counteroffer, and therefore the original offer is skewed. It's called the mirror image rule. They have to mirror each other like a spider, or I guess it wouldn't be an octopus, but a spider on a mirror. They have to be identical on all their major points of consideration. And that makes kind of sense. So the acceptance does have to be communicated to the offeror. The offeree has to communicate to the offeror that they accept, and it has to be on the terms of the offer. Otherwise, it's a counteroffer. And the mode of acceptance, how does it have to be communicated? This is a fun one, and I used to do a true and false, and everyone got it wrong. If you call me up and make the offer, how do I have to accept? A lot of people think the offer, and it was at one time, it's not the rule anymore. We've gone to a more common sense principle. I could accept by calling you back on the phone because that's how the offer was made. But now the rule is any reasonable mode of communication. So I used to put on a true and false, any mode of communication. Well, okay, so you can hire one of those planes at the beach that has a big banner on the back. Hey, Corman, I accept your offer for the sale of your phone. That's not a reasonable form of communication. Or you've been trained in sending smoke signals. That's not a reasonable form of communication. But if you called me up and made an offer, and I emailed you or maybe text you my acceptance on the terms you've made, that would be a valid acceptance. We now have a binding contract. You can do that. You don't have to use. Now, could you as the offeror say, I'm making this offer to you, and the mode of acceptance must be in writing via first-class mail? Yes. You can contractually impose an obligation how acceptance has to occur. But like a lot of us, we don't get into that kind of detail, and therefore the law is going to say a reasonable mode of acceptance is all form of communication is all that we need, because we want parties to freely be able to contract. It's part of our nation's history, actually. The formation of our nation was over this kind of concept of freedom of contract. It's inherent in our Constitution. People should be allowed to contract freely as they deem fit over topics that they think are appropriate, as long as it's not illegal or immoral. I shouldn't say immoral, but immoral such that it's going to avoid public policy where the courts aren't going to get into enforcing it. So that's the manner of acceptance. Just has to be reasonable. Counteroffers are over and over. And that's pretty much this chapter in a nutshell. I hope this helped a little bit. I thought I'd be a lot longer. But usually in class live, I give a lot more example. I'll just give you one more example. I was thinking about this. I just bought this button at an antique dealer. It's a Bobby Kennedy for President button. Ran in '68. He was assassinated right after the Democratic Convention in California. I don't just collect his stuff. I collect every politician. I don't care what party, Republican, Democrat, Labor Party, you name it. Especially older historical stuff. I love it. So I was in an antique shop, and I was surprised to see this one. It was in very good condition. I kind of know the value of these things. And the price on it wasn't too bad. But, I'm trying to save money, a buck or two. But I offered $2 off the price that they were asking. And the dealer said, I can't. That's not my button. It's another person that has a consignment shop here. And I said, oh, okay. But is his offer still open? I think he wanted $12 for it. No, because I made a counteroffer of $10. Obviously, if I'm going to turn around and offer back to them what their original offer was, they're probably going to take it. And that's exactly what happened. So I ended up paying full price. But what if this button was surrounded by two other buttons, which it was? Alf Landon, who ran against FDR. No one remembers him because FDR wiped out pretty much everybody he ran against. There was two buttons next to it. And so I tried to do another counteroffer. I said, all right, I'll pay the $12, but can you throw in those two Alf Landon buttons for $4 each? And he wanted $5 each. I was trying to save $2 for some reason. And he said, well, again, I'm not the owner. And I know how these antique shops work. I said, hey, can you give the owner? And he did. He gave him a quick call, and he did. He gave me the discount on the Alf Landon buttons. My point is, all those things represent I'm making an offer. They weren't making an offer. It was in an antique shop. That advertisement on this button was an advertisement to me. If I say, I accept, they can say, oh, the seller doesn't want to sell, or I don't want to sell it anymore, because they're basically making invitations to bid. Chances are they're going to hold to that price because they want to keep goodwill in the community. They don't want to have fake prices on things. So when people say I accept, they say, well, no, that's not really the real price. That would be nonsense. For the most part, treat it as it really is almost an offer, and you're accepting by making your offer to them. But there's a lot of concern. What if I did come in there and I say, you know what? Say it was a very expensive button. There's a few I collect that. If I can get my hands on them. There's one that's well over $100. I'm always looking for a specific candidate from the 1920s, and I make an offer to you to buy your button. Maybe you just have button collection. I'm over your house. You're a button collector too, and I see one of your buttons. I said, hey, I'll give you $150 for that Eugene Debs button. And you say, oh, that's not too bad a price. Let me mull it over. How long does that offer stay open for? A week? A couple days? Now, I'm out usually every week, and not since COVID, obviously. That's probably why I'm going insane. But I do stop I live in kind of an antique area. I do stop a lot and go around to different places. What if I found that button already at some other place in the next week? I bought that button. Now I don't have another $150 to blow on that guy's button that I made the offer to. When can they accept? Again, it's a reasonable period of time. But what might I do to be smart? I'll buy your button for $150. This offer expires in 3 days. I can revoke that offer the minute I get my car. I say, actually, I want to spend $150. It's Father's Day tomorrow, and I want to buy myself some presents because I know my kids won't. Those are the kinds of things that we can do. We're the owner of the offer. We can revoke it unless it's an option contract. I think the book does a pretty good job. This is the kind of chapter I urge you to read and reread. I also urge you to shoot me an email or a text or something like that, especially if you're having trouble with some of the information or you have a question about it. That's what I'm here for. This is what I get paid for. Don't be afraid to do that. And the other issue is on the case problems. When you're doing the case problems, I'll admit sometimes the case problems are a real horror show. Like, what is the author trying to get out of this case? And some of you are actually looking up the cases. These are real cases. Don't kill yourself in the class. The whole goal of those case problems are for you to try to apply the principle as if you're the judge. You're looking at the fact pattern and you're saying, well, geez, based upon the legal principle I think I learned in this chapter, this is what the outcome should be. That's what I want from you. And if you do it in good faith, even if you're wrong, you pretty much get close to full credit. And I supply you with a little snapshot of what the court actually ruled on the case, so the learning hopefully gets a little bit more deeper and clarified as we go forward. So don't panic over that. I know some of you don't like the case problems. I get it. But if you make a good faith effort, I'm not going to ding you too much in the homework assignment. And I have to admit, trying something and getting it wrong and then hearing how the right application goes sometimes really helps you solidify your understanding of the problem. Chapter 7 is a much easier chapter, in my opinion. Surprising chapter because minors are not bound into a contract if they so wish to rescind it. However, it is a valid contract until revocation occurs. And we'll get to that maybe tomorrow because that's a shorter one. I'll get it done. Sorry it's so long. Again, chunk it out, break it up into pieces, and have a wonderful summer solstice. Talk to you soon.